Hey everybody, it's Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner. Victoria's probably about to
And
lose her voice.
oh,
That's your title for this episode. Um, it's time for one of those episodes where we talk a lot and we put some pictures on the screen, and then it gets a lot of views, probably because the thumbnail is album art and people think that we've uploaded episodes to YouTube. But let's be optimistic and think that people just really want that hot lore that we're giving them, because these episodes are always 18 times as in-depth as AIOO Wiki's profiles for characters. Because I just dig deep, like I, dip down, as Glossaric taught us all.
I I still don't know if I like Star's character that much by the end of the show. I'm still figuring it out.
So,
Marco and Tom are still the best characters.
so we are finally updating Whit's lore. It was the first lore that we ever did. It was the 15th episode of the Oddcast. The actual date that it was uploaded. Now I'll actually check the date and see when it was. AIO Oddcast channel videos, and load more, load more, load more. 4 years ago, 5 years ago. All right, there we go. John Avery Whitaker lore uploaded 5 years ago, and it was uploaded December 28th, 2013, so 5.5 years ago. That's a long time, kids.
Do you feel old?
Some of you weren't even born back then.
Don't say that.
Yeah, like, when we did the original Wit's lore, I did not think that we were going to get a huge amount more lore for Wit. Like, I knew over time they'd slowly roll out more bits that would give us a little bit more information here and there. I believe when the original one came out, the most recent piece of lore, yeah, I guess it would have had to be the most recent piece of lore because it was in the last album at the time, was Great Expectations in album 56, which was a great one for Wit's lore because it connected together a bunch. It was like a lot of transition scenes between different parts of Wit's life all throughout his life. So that was an amazing episode for understanding the timeline of his life. But since then, we've had the Journal of John Avery Whitaker. We had the Boat People, parts 1 and 2. We had No Friend Like an Old Friend. We had everything talking about Wilson existing. We had Charlotte. We had Young Wit, book 1 and 2. And probably more that aren't off the top of my head because there's been a lot. Yeah, it's been great. So after Young Wit, book 1 and 2, as I was reading them, I was like, we have to update. This is the time. It is the right time now before book 3 comes out in November. It is time to do an updated version of Wit's lore because there's so much to talk about. It is a lot more than we knew before. Last time we did this, we didn't even know the name of Wit's mom. Like, we've learned a lot since then.
Also, Charlie's not in the other one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you mentioned her anyway, but
Yeah, I did, but we didn't know her name. We didn't know, like, that she existed outside of one Family Portraits episode. She was never really confirmed to, like, really, really exist. So
which you said yes every time I said, "Hey, she's not technically real."
I
You're like, "Yes,
believed,
she
I
is."
believed, and you know what? Jesus gave me that belief. He brought that belief to reality. So,
So like your belief in Charlie brought her into existence. My belief in Wellington got him more episodes.
yes. Yes, in a very Homestuck-like manner, the act of believing in the thing decreased its fakeness attribute until it was ushered into reality. So, we have a lot of words to say at your faces, so let's get right to it. This is the lore for John Avery Whitaker, accurate up to episode 863, including Young Wit, books 1 and 2. Whit is part of an ancient family line of McClintocks protecting the healing and life-extending swaddling cloth of Jesus, handed down from Father Lucian of Kafar Gamala in 415 AD as revealed to him by the ghost of Saint Gamaliel. Thomas Avery McClintock died a hero as he rescued passengers from a massive train wreck and fire. Similarly a hero was his brother Germanicus Wellington McClintock, who moved to America in 1853, secretly teaching dozens of North Carolinian slaves to read and write, being a staunch abolitionist. He fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War, likely due to conscription, but after being shot in the head by Thaddeus Knox and falsely accused of stealing Confederate wages, he left for Texas, branded a traitor and thief by the town of Providence, later dying on April 15, 1912. Thomas was survived by his son, Jackson McClintock, a mine inspector. Jackson and his wife, Marin, begat Janeth and David. David McClintock was a pilot in World War I, and while in Verdun, France, he rescued a crashed pilot named Harold Whittaker. Harold Whittaker was an American, grandson of Nathaniel Titus Whittaker, who lied about his age at 16 to be able to fight for the North in the Civil War. David introduced Harold to his sister, and Janeth D. McClintock married Harold Whittaker. It was presumably after this point that he moved to Scotland. He obtained his undergraduate in English literature from the University of Aberdeen in 1920, his Master's of Arts degree in Medieval and Renaissance history from the same school in 1921, and his PhD in History of Theology with a thesis on natural and revealed religions from the University of St. Andrews in 1924.
On October 1st, 1925, Janeth gave birth to John Avery Whittaker in Kinglassie, Scotland. When Whit was 2 years old, on January 25, 1928, he suffered a serious health crisis without Harold's knowledge. He was healed with the ancient healing swaddling cloth that had been passed secretly down the family line. Harold knew that something was amiss, but Jackson and Janeth wouldn't tell him, so he left the next day for mainland Europe and the Holy Land to study religious archaeology, not knowing if he would return. After Harold came back, when Whit was 4, having read all The Hound of the Baskervilles, his father took him to England to meet Harold's friend, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, shortly before his death in 1930. When Whit was 5, his mother caught smallpox from her father Jackson, and she passed away. Within the next year, Harold married their housekeeper Fiona Donnerell, whose husband had left her a long time ago. Through this, Whit gained a stepsister, Charlotte Marie Donnerell, or Charlie, about 5 years and 2 months his younger. Whit also has an American cousin named Evelyn, likely on his father's side. He also had a dog named Macduff while living in Scotland, who died in a car accident shortly before they left Scotland. When Whit was 6, Grandpa Jackson died in an accident at the mine. Having lost his wife and both parents-in-law, a grieved Harold decided to return to America with his family 1 month after Jackson's death. They moved around continually over the next 3 years as Harold took different teaching positions, including the University of North Carolina. Eventually, when Whit was 9, Harold took up a position at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, near where he grew up.
At the end of August 1935, a week prior to Harold beginning his position at Duke, the family moved from Charlotte to Providence, Newberry County, North Carolina, 413 Magnolia Lane, across the street from Emily Capello, Jack Allen's future wife. He began school at Brookhaven Junior High in 6th grade, having skipped a year during his family's stay in Charlotte. On his first day of school, he met a bully 2 years his elder, his future brother-in-law, and great-grandson of the soldier who shot Germanicus Wellington McClintock in the head, Wilson Knox. 6 weeks into his life in Providence, by mid-October, Whit had cleared the besmirched name of G.W. McClintock and found the missing Confederate gold. Days later, he found a new terrier that he kept and also named Macduff, after accidentally stabbing it with a sword and healing it using the healing cloth. Several weeks later, on November 26th, Fiona was blinded in a horse riding accident when she ran into a tree branch. She eventually led Whit to God as a result of her accident, and the relationship between Whit and Fiona became much closer than it had been since Janeth died. One time when Whit was young, he told Charlotte to leave after she wouldn't stop playing with his toys, and she ran away. She was found 3 days later in the woods, nearly starved and frozen, but they were much closer after that. For Christmas that year, Whit began his journal, given to him by Fiona. On Valentine's Day of 1936, Whit got his first crush on a girl named Lisa, but he let it end when he learned she wasn't a Christian. On May 14th of that year, Whit met his best friend, Jack Allen, after saving him from the bully Laszlo Farnsworth. Jack gave him the nickname Whit immediately thereafter, echoing Emily's earlier idea, for being witty, Whittaker, and religious, alluding to Whit Sunday, a UK name for Pentecost Sunday. The name caught on by the end of the day, though it took Whit a little time to get used to it. On his 11th birthday, Whit started making lists of everything he wanted to do with his life. Some of these dreams included being a teacher, learning to be a pilot, and writing for National Geographic. Jack later went on to make similar lists with Whit. One summer, Jack joined Whit in his annual vacation to Bath, North Carolina, where Harold's brother Randy was the town sheriff. Whit and Jack discovered a cave in the bay in which they discovered a number of gold Spanish doubloons. They went on to sell all but one of the doubloons to a museum and used the money to pay their way through university. In middle school, Jack and Whit often hung out in a treehouse they called the Castle. Whit, Jack, and Wilson were the sole members of their middle school science club. When Jack's mother needed an operation for her feet, Whit tried to secretly enter an unapproved science experiment on luminol blood detection in a science fair at one of the local universities. He was found out by Wilson and the principal, but upon explaining the situation, was allowed to use the experiment to win the money for the operation. Whit and Jack would become close friends with Wilson eventually, and Wilson would go on to marry Charlie, Whit's stepsister, and become Whit's brother-in-law, as well as the pastor of Odyssey Community Church many, many years later. Whit graduated from Raleigh High School in North Carolina and personalized his class ring with a unicorn to represent his Scottish origins. He began studying philosophy and literature at Duke University. Whit planned to intern as a writer for National Geographic as a young man while in university, but his dreams were put on hold when he was drafted into the U.S. Navy for World War II. He became a signalman on July 20th, 1942, and was assigned to the USS Iron Gate on August 27th. He was immediately given on loan to the PT-211, where his first mission involved rescuing Lieutenant Reginald Duffield from Manitogo Point under the nose of the Japanese. He later fought with Duffield in the Battle for Guadalcanal, and after saving the lives of his entire transport, including Duffield, Whit suffered severe injury from an explosion and lost the top of his right ear. Shrapnel in his leg led to a limp which would still be slightly noticeable for years thereafter. After the war, Whit transferred to the University of Southern California, finishing his original degree, while also studying journalism to become a writer. While studying, he wrote a screenplay for a documentary on David Livingstone that nearly went big, but his meeting with the producer had to be canceled so that Whit could accept a full-ride scholarship for the university, and the screenplay became another lost dream. He was also in a serious long-term relationship that ended because the girl wasn't a Christian. This may have been his long-term relationship with Eloise Fredericks. He eventually met a girl named Guinevere Morrow at the Pasadena Public Library, for whom he immediately fell. She, however, turned out to be dating Jack, who was attending the University of California, Los Angeles at the time. After a falling out that nearly destroyed their friendship, Whit and Jenny ended up together with Jack's blessing. Whit graduated with a double Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy and literature.
After marrying Jenny and living in Pasadena, Whit was about to get his pilot's license when Jenny became pregnant, and they eventually had 3 children, Jerry, Jana, and Jason. Early on in this, at some point, Whit founded the Universal Press Foundation, including the creation of the Universal Encyclopedia. When Jerry was 3 and while Jenny was pregnant with Jana, while Harold was traveling in Scotland, Charlie got engaged to Wilson Knox. Wilson was a year from finishing seminary, and Charlie had become a Christian 4 years prior, unbeknownst to Whit. Whit and Jenny helped with the wedding preparations despite Whit's cold feelings towards his stepsister after she missed his wedding and Fiona's funeral due to travel. 6 months prior to the wedding, Charlie was secretly diagnosed with an aggressive cancer, prompting her and Wilson to elope and spend as much time together as possible. Upon return, she and Whit fought before she had the chance to explain her illness, and she passed away 2 weeks later without the chance to say goodbye.
Whether for the original printing or for subsequent editions, Whit was often collecting specimens and research for his encyclopedias throughout the childhoods of his children. As his children grew up and UPF was beginning, Whit was often disheartened in his parenting, as he wasn't able to provide for his family as much as he wished. Somewhere early on during the writing of the Universal Encyclopedias, it likely happened that Whit traveled to the small European country of Moldavia, where he became ensnared in a political caper after discovering he was physically identical to the crowned prince. In the end, he was officially crowned King of Moldavia in the prince's stead while he was indisposed. At some point, Whit was also an active agent for the Department of Defense, and later on, during his time with UPF, he was often used as a consultant for computer programming by the DoD. Among his consulting projects was one very long-term project he headed called Applesauce. Whit also had training as an archaeologist and made something of himself in that community at some point in his illustrious career, such that he knew and was known to Dalton Kern, who was once named Archaeologist of the Year. Jerry, Whit's eldest son, joined the army to fight in Vietnam, and he took Whit's class ring with him, wearing it around his neck. Jerry was killed in action on November 12, 1971, taking a bullet to protect an elderly lady named Lee, whose rice farm was under attack, and dying at his camp shortly thereafter. The ring was found by Lee. The news drastically affected Whit, and as Jason was only a few years short of draft age, Whit began to focus on spending more time with him, and his relationship with Jana began to subtly suffer more and more. Whit felt resentment towards the people of Vietnam, blaming them for Jerry's death. He even refused to donate to World Vision's project to create the Sea Sweep, a ship which would rescue fleeing Vietnamese emigrants without a country to which to flee. After Jerry died, Whit and his family moved from Chicago to the tiny town of Odyssey for a quieter life. While Whit remained the CEO and head of the board of UPF, he became an English teacher at McCallum Junior High in Odyssey for 14 years and even won a teaching award. He also taught part-time at Odyssey High. On top of all this, he also taught Sunday school at Odyssey Community Church. Eventually, Jason moved out to work for the National Security Agency, and Jana married Phil Dowd, had children Jenny and Monty, and moved to LA, working at a bank. Jenny became very involved in political causes in Odyssey, including the saving of the Fillmore Recreation Center. While Whit didn't agree with the saving of the building, he supported Jenny through it. Whit was already retired from teaching by this point. Jenny, however, caused strep throat during this time, and the night of the final Odyssey City Council vote on what to do with the building, Jenny collapsed and died later that night due to the strep infection complicating into chronic glomerulonephritis. Whit and Jenny were married for over 30 years. The vote for the Fillmore was postponed for 1 month out of respect for Jenny's death. During this time, Jack, who was running an orphanage in Nebraska, brought Whit to visit him. Jack tried to bring Whit together with a young orphan named Clara in the hopes that a friendship between them would help Whit move past his loss of Jenny and Clara to move past the loss of her parents. Because Jack neglected to mention to Whit that Clara had already been chosen for adoption, Whit decided that he was going to adopt Clara. When he found out, although he still let Clara leave with the Portlands, her new parents, he was terribly outraged at how Jack had manipulated him, and left Nebraska saying that he wasn't sure he ever wanted to speak to Jack again. After returning to Odyssey, Tom Riley and Officer David Harley visited Whit and planted the seed which convinced him to save the Fillmore. This was the beginning of Whit's close friendship with Tom. Whit purchased the Fillmore for $3.5 million on behalf of UPF, beating out the Webster development firm's bid of $3 million. Whit believed that he had purchased both the building and land, but he later discovered that he had purchased the building only, as the land was a part of McAllister Park, preventing the land from being sold by the city according to the terms of the original donation of the land to the city of Odyssey from the McAllister family. Whit opened Whit's End in the old Fillmore, making it into the place Jenny had wanted to see it become before its passing. It turned out that there was a very peculiar mineral in the tunnels under the building, which helped Whit with some of his research and inventions. He was likely still working on applesauce at this point. He also had a secret computer room installed off of his office upon moving into the building. Whit eventually hired a boy named Jimmy to work there, and Tom also helped occasionally. 4 years passed by before adventures in Odyssey began.
Whit soon hired Connie Kendall to help with the shop and quickly took a very personal interest in her. Soon after, Eugene Meltzner also started working at Whit's End. Whit installed applesauce on the computer in his secret computer room, along with an advanced virtual intelligence and masterlog program to control and keep track of everything in Whit's End for demographic research on the displays and inventions. At some point during this time, Whit worked together with Jason's friend Tasha Forbes on a top-secret project to develop a compound named TA418. This compound was used to mutate the disease Ruku into a supervirus. Whit was able to contribute by the key use of the mineral under Whit's End as well as the incredible computing power of applesauce. When Whit showed Eugene the computer room, Connie found out and accidentally activated applesauce, leading to both Connie and Eugene being fired from Whit's End. They were rehired later on after Whit's first known personal encounter with Dr. Regis Blackard. Whit deleted applesauce after the incident, fearing the implication it could hold for the world. He still continued to do work for the DoD.
Whit eventually left Odyssey for Israel to take over the Aharoni dig near Jerusalem. The dig was sponsored by UPF, and when Dr. Baines, the head of the project, passed away, it was going to be shut down if someone didn't take over, so Whit decided to leave Odyssey for a time. On the day that Whit left, Jack arrived in Odyssey, having come to reconcile his relationship with Whit after the Clara incident. After spending quite a while in Israel, Whit discovered a Gnostic gospel claiming to have been written by Judas Iscariot at his secret dig. The parchment claimed that Jesus never resurrected and gave directions to the bones of Jesus. Originally believing the find could be the Q document, the source document for the 4 Gospels, Whit contacted the Israeli government. In conjunction with the NSA, the Israelis concocted a plan to draw out the 2 biggest artifact smuggling organizations in Israel, the Symposium and First Things, using Whit and the Q document as bait. When Whit sent a cryptic message back to Odyssey, Jason and Eugene traveled to Israel to help, and Whit emerged from hiding to reunite with his son and Eugene for the first time in a very long while. Whit and company lured and exposed the smugglers while proving the document to be an ancient hoax. Whit finally returned to Odyssey and reconciled with Jack about Claire's adoption. Whit was pressured by the UPF board to continue missions work long-term, but sent missionary Dan Ysidro instead. Not long thereafter, Whit met businesswoman Margaret Fay and began to date her, but turned down her marriage proposal due to the discrepancies in their faiths. This later created tension between them when Margaret became mayor of Odyssey. In the Novacom saga, Whit teamed up with Mary's Story Shop to build a second Whit's End in Connellsville. This turned out to be a scheme by Andromeda to get their hands on the Imagination Station to use as hardware for Operation Think Tank. They later succeeded in stealing the device. Much later on, when Eugene returned to Odyssey, the NIH sought Whit's help in using the Imagination Station, along with Eugene's research for Andromeda, to restore his memory. When the Health and Safety Inspector visited Whit's End during Odyssey's run in the Best Small Town competition, it was discovered that the repairs made to Whit's End's foundational structure after Blackguard's bomb in the tunnel were regressing, and the building was condemned until it could be repaired. During this time, it was discovered that Whit's End couldn't operate under religious principles on government property, and the shop was nearly closed indefinitely. Eventually, through legal wrangling, Eleanor McAllister sold McAllister Park to Whit on behalf of UPF for the sum total of $1. After turning a list of his young dreams into an Imagination Station adventure, Emily Jones was able to convince Whit to take up flying lessons, an idea he abandoned long before when Jerry was conceived. Whit had the chance to meet the family of Lee, the woman for whom Jerry died protecting in Vietnam. Whit was racked with guilt upon learning that they were rescued by the Sea Sweep, and that his refusal to donate could have doomed the family that Jerry died to protect. Whit received forgiveness, and his class ring was finally returned to him. Wilson Knox, after decades of mobile pastoring across the country, decided to settle in Odyssey with his brother-in-law, taking up pastorship of Odyssey Community Church. This has been the lore for John Avery Whittaker, accurate up to episode 863, including Young Whit Books 1 and 2. Boy, that sure was a whole lot of words we just said now there, then, wasn't it, Victoria? Yeah, and once this is done, we'll go and record the actual audio. So, hopefully you enjoyed that. There was a lot in there. If you didn't read the Young Whit books, or you ignored the spoiler tag in the title, then some things in there may be rather surprising to you. Maybe you need to go pick the books up now and kind of understand some of what we were laying down in the first couple paragraphs, because it was a lot if you didn't know that was coming. Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever do another updated version of this, or for any other character, if anyone else is going to have...
We could do it for Tom, because there's so much to add.
So much new Tom stuff, content,
So much new Tom.
If any other character that we've done it for before is going to have enough new content added to warrant like that kind of upgrade, such as Whit has had here, probably not. But there will be other lores for new things that we haven't done yet to come out in the future. When will they come out? Who knows? I'm bad at scheduling things. So until then, next time, I don't think you remember what the March episode is, Victoria, but it is Between Camp and a Hard Place, Part 1. And then, of course, we will also be finishing Malachi's Message, Part 3. So that's next time.
Okay.
Yep. That's the next episode. Until then, thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Melsner.
And I'm still sitting in this chair.
And you've been watching The Adventures in Odyssey, Oddcast.
He also had a dog named Macduff while living in Scotland, who died in a car accident shortly before they left Scotland. It makes it sound like the dog was driving the car, and then it died. I mean, a dog probably would die if it was driving a car. It's the way Sherman wants to go out. Do you think all Whit's dogs die while driving cars? I want Sherman to go up flying the Stratoflyer into the clock tower, like a huge Michael Bay explosion.
Due to the strep infection complicating into chronic glomerulonephritis. Glomerulonephritis. Into chronic glomerulonephritis. Complicating into chronic glomerulonephritis. R's and L's, man. Oh, what a... Man. It's no wonder so many languages in the world just blend their phonemes for R's and L's. It's not like I can't say glomerulus, but when you put the N at the end, glomerulonephritis. Ugh.
Including the creation of the Universal Encyclopedia. It's crazy.